Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and this video is going to be a jQuery masterclass. Okay, so first on, again, this is 2021, so why am I doing a video on jQuery? So while jQuery doesn't get the same sort of love and excitement that it used to get, jQuery is still a very relevant technology. Like if I go to, if I Google percentage of sites using jQuery, okay, just to kind of give you a number. So jQuery is used by 95.5% of all websites that whose JavaScript libraries we know. So of websites they can detect, 95% of them, which is 78.2% of all websites. Okay, and again, that's as of like this year, October 2021. Okay, so let's see here. If I do the same thing with React, let's see if I can get the same number. Okay, I don't get the same number there, but I know we can get the same number around here somewhere. Here we go. Okay, let's see here. And I can go down here and I can have it compared to React. So here we go. It just sort of shows me sort of both of them side by side. Just want to see the exact number. I think it's actually right over here. So show me the thing. There we go. So you can see here jQuery is being used on 7.5 million websites. While React, one of the biggest front-end frameworks in the modern era, is used on 1.5 million websites. So the point is, like, if you're a developer out there, you don't know, are you going to get a job at a company who has like older code, newer code? So you might be working on a React app, but you might be working on jQuery code bases. Okay, as a developer who works with a lot of clients on the freelance level, I have worked with people who are using jQuery and React, and several other different possibilities. So point is, jQuery is still quite relevant and still quite nice. Okay, if you are using something like server-side templating, okay, while there are some modern alternatives like Alpine.js and HTMX, jQuery still can be a very great tool for doing your front-end JavaScript when you're working with server-side templating. That means like using things like maybe Ruby with embedded Ruby templates and Ruby on Rails, or using Laravel with Blade templates, and you need to kind of splash in some front-end JavaScript. jQuery tends to still be sort of a really nice tool for those purposes. Okay, so there's still plenty of reason to be familiar with jQuery. Okay, and while a lot of the things that are like the key pieces of jQuery, like accessing DOM elements and whatnot, have been kind of adapted into plain vanilla DOM manipulation in functions like query selector, there's a lot of other benefits that jQuery gives you, like really cool animation functions, built in like if you go to the jQuery UI library, which has things like the ability to like do cool animation effects, being able to drag and drop things with ease. A lot of these things really kind of make it a really nice tool, especially if you're just doing something that's not necessarily something that doesn't really necessarily need like a heavy duty framework like React, Angular, Svelte, Solid.js, or something like that. So now that we've kind of set the why, let's start learning jQuery. Okay, so let's just do a basic setup. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some files. Okay, I'm going to create the obligatory index.html. Okay, and then we'll do a JavaScript file, so we'll call it, you know, code.js or whatever. Call it app.js or whatever you want. I'll call it code.js. And then I'll have a CSS file. We'll call it touchstyles.css. And let's see here. Okay, what I'm going to do is just set up a basic HTML document. Okay, so there it is. Make sure we're going to get the jQuery script tag, which is just go to code.jquery.com. So I'll just go over here, click on compressed. Okay, and there we go. And I will just copy the script tag here. Nice. Okay, so that's there. Now let me link to my CSS file. I'll use Emmet, so I can just type in like link CSS, make that styles.css, and then type in script source. Okay, and then I'm going to connect to my code.js, and I'm going to add a defer keyword. Because again, if you've done DOM manipulation lately, you know that you should probably defer your script tags to run till after the DOM loads. Now you don't necessarily have to put your script tags at the bottom of the body tag anymore, or use a Windows on load event. You can now just stick this keyword defer and you're good. Isn't that nice? Okay, so that's all well and good. Okay, so with that, let's open this up in the browser. Okay, so I'm going to open this up in the browser. Let me just find the little live server button, which is not showing up at the moment. So maybe if I make this full screen, I highlight the index.html, and no, it doesn't want to show up at the moment. Okay, okay, it's back in my menu here. That's nice. I like how it just randomly decides to do so or not be there. Okay, so we have opened up with live server. Again, that's like a VS Code extension for just creating a quick web server to serve a local project. And basically live server will serve it for us on port 5500 of our local host. Again, the IP address 127.0.01. Again, it's just like technically if I type in localhost 5500, that's going to take me to the same place, because localhost is just a word to use instead of having to type in 127.0.01, which is always the IP address of the computer that you're on. Okay, so we got a blank website. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my DevTools, so my Chrome DevTools, and I, again, always double check that all your files are connected. So I'm going to open up my sources tab and double check that, look, yep, my JavaScript file's there, my CSS file's there, and yep, jQuery is connected. So I'm all good to go. Okay, now in jQuery, one of the nice things is that when we were doing, if you do like plain vanilla DOM manipulation, if I wanted to like grab the body tag, I would have to do like document dot query selector, and then I would use a CSS selector and I'd say body. Okay, and that would select the body tag, and that works fine. But with jQuery, I can just do this. I just use a $ instead of document.querySelector. And I can still pass in body, and there it is. I've selected the body. Okay. Now there's a slight difference. When we are using plain vanilla DOM manipulation, like you're using normal JavaScript functions, it always returns you a DOM node. Okay, so just a native JavaScript DOM node and all of its properties. What jQuery does, for a good reason, what it does, we'll just save this in a variable. So I'll just call the variable body. So we'll just say this body variable is going to equal the body tag. And I'll console.log it so you can see what I'm talking about. Now if I go back to the browser and I open up my console here, notice that what I console log is a jQuery object. So I'm not getting a DOM node like query selector would give me. And this is for a very important reason. The way jQuery handles the DOM nodes is that whenever you select or query the DOM using the jQuery function, that's what that $ is called, the jQuery function. What it does, it takes whatever it finds, whether it's one node or many nodes, and wraps it in a jQuery object. And a jQuery object acts as kind of like this array of nodes, which could again be one node or many nodes, that has all these methods, which is really nice because if you have a lot of nodes, those methods will actually make changes to all of them at the same time. Which is not the way it works when you're using plain vanilla JavaScript. If I want to make the same change to an array of nodes, I'd have to like loop through those nodes and make those changes a little bit more with a little bit more effort. So to show you an example of what I mean, okay, let's watch me create I'll create like 5 divs. So we'll say I'll use mn, I'll say div times 5. That creates 5 divs, right? Okay, now what I can do is I can select those divs. So let's just create a variable to hold the divs. Divs equals, and I'll target anything that's a div. So that should put all the divs in a jQuery object. So let me console log it just to confirm. Divs. Okay, so I go back and I take a look in here, and what do I see? An array of divs. So it's a jQuery object that's really an array of div nodes. So now I could just do this. I could just be like divs.text and make all of them say cheese. And that's going to change the text of all of them to cheese. And see, there you go. Okay, I'm able to make the same change to anything that's in the jQuery object when I use those jQuery methods. The other cool thing about those methods is that they all return the object back. So that means you can chain them, which you can't do with plain vanilla DOM manipulation. So I can do this. I can say, hey, I want to change the text, but I'd also like to change their CSS property. I want to change their font size to 2 EMs. And let's take a look. Okay, so I've added the same text to all of them, and I have set their CSS property. That's pretty cool, okay, because I can do a lot more in a line of code than I necessarily could with just plain vanilla DOM manipulation that doesn't quite have that same sort of paradigm on the way it's structured. So jQuery really makes like the code succinct. Well, like once you really appreciate that jQuery object, it becomes pretty powerful how this works. Okay, cool. And the cool thing is, like, these functions, they all have like oftentimes double uses. So if I take that divs and I console.log divs.text, but I don't give it an argument, it's actually going to return whatever the current text is. So in that case, now that I've changed the text to cheese, see, I console log and it gives me the text for all the nodes that are in the array. So again, whatever function you use, it's going to apply to anything in that array. But what if I only want one of these divs, right? Well, it's an array, so why don't I just do like 0? Now here's where we run into our first sort of little snag. Problem is, even though you do get an array inside of jQuery, so again, we see that array of divs, these what's in here are actual DOM nodes. They're actual just normal JavaScript, plain vanilla DOM nodes. So they won't have the jQuery methods. So what we need is a jQuery object that just has that one particular div. So in jQuery, what we can do to grab the right one is I can do .eq. What this does, it just grabs the thing at that index and wraps it in a jQuery object. So that way I have access to all the methods. And now I can just grab the text of that one div, okay, which you can see right there. Okay, that's pretty cool. So that's all fine and good. Okay. And again, you can change, not in the same way I could change the text, there's also a property for changing the HTML. So again, in normal JavaScript, you'd be changing like the inner text property or the inner HTML property. But here what we can do is we can use the text function or the HTML function. So I can say divs, I want all these divs to have the following HTML inside of them. So all of these will have a, every single one of them will have an H1 inside of them that says hello world. Okay, now if I go back, see, now they all have an H1 that say hello world in it, and I can actually see that in my elements tab. See, there's the H1. So I can literally just inject HTML in it using this HTML function. Again, like the inner HTML property, I mean, it is the inner HTML property, but the cool thing again is I could also get the HTML within the div by not passing an argument. So like HTML tags, if I pass them a string, it replaces the text or the HTML in that tag. And if I don't pass anything, it returns me the current text or HTML. Yay. Okay. So that's pretty cool. Okay, other things I can do. I can create elements. Okay, so let's say I want to create an H1. What I can do is I'll create a variable for my H1, so const H1. And what I'll do is I'll use the jQuery function. But the difference is instead of passing it a CSS selector, like a div or a class or an ID, what I do is I pass it, okay, like a tag name. So I'll say like H1, okay, and that's going to create the element. But I have to pass, but the thing is that I have to do an extra step. I have to declare it with angle brackets. So it's the angle brackets that tells jQuery, oh, you don't want me to go query the DOM and bring you back a particular node. You want me to create an H1. Okay, now if I was doing this in normal JavaScript, this would have to look like this. Document.create element H1. Okay, notice the difference, the number of characters I have to type. That's pretty cool to create an element. And the cool thing is that I can start chaining all those other methods on it. So I can be like .text, hello world, and then I can again say .css. I want to change like the font color to blue. And then what I can do is I can go attach it to the, let's say I want to attach this H1 to one of those divs. So I can say, hey, divs, Again, I don't want to attach it to all the divs. So I'm going to say, hey, get me the first div. That would be EQ0 as we saw earlier. And I'm going to append the H1. Okay, and there we go. I'm just saying, hey, give me the first of this chain of divs, this array of divs, give me the first one, and append the H1 to it. And there it is. Pretty cool. Okay. Now, what if I want to add a function? Okay, so let's say I decided I wanted to add a function to these divs. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually... let me think, what do I want to do? Well, I'm going to get rid of this for now. I'm going to go back to adding like just some arbitrary HTML to those divs. So divs.html, and we'll give them all, everything will have a H2 with a class of cheese. Okay. And they're going to say hello world. Okay, and let me just close that string. And again, now I should see that they all have hello world H2s. And again, if I look in the DOM here, I can see they all have the class of cheese. Okay, I love that HTML function. That makes things a lot easier. Okay, so that's all fun and good. Now, what I can do is, again, I could also add events to all those divs. So I can be like, hey, divs, and instead of having to type in, like, again, the way this would have looked like in plain vanilla DOM manipulation, it would have been like node, whatever node I was selecting, and then I would have to do like add event listener, and then I had to be like do a click thing, and then give it a function saying, hey, do this thing. But with jQuery, I can be like divs dot on, meaning like on click, on submit, on mouse enter, on whatever. Okay. So I'm going to say on click for any of these divs. I want to, then I'll write a function where I can wrap anything I want to happen. Okay, and just like a normal event listener, you have access to the event object, so it's just, that doesn't change. Okay, now what I'm going to want to do is just say event.currentTarget, and let's say you wanted to use the current target or target. All you have to do is wrap it in the jQuery function. So I'll just say const t for target equals the jQuery function, and I will pass the event.target to it. And I'm going to say take the event.target, and we'll change its font color to green. Okay, and then now let's just try that out. So if I click on this, boop, 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 boop. So pretty straightforward. Okay, and let's say I wanted to remove the event listener off the divs. Like after I click on one of them, I can do something like this. I can do divs dot off, and that removes the event listener that's already on there. And I'm pretty sure it's off. I'll double check in case it doesn't work. But basically, I should be able to change the first one, and then I shouldn't be able to change the other ones. Yep, because see the event listener has been removed, and see that's all pretty easy. Thank you, jQuery. So again, adding events is pretty straightforward. Now you might be aware of things like stop prop. That usually these functions that are built into the event, like stop propagation that prevents like bubbling, and prevent default that prevents like forms from refreshing the page. In jQuery, you can trigger all those functions by literally just returning false in your event handlers, and then that literally automatically turns on stop propagation, prevent default, so you don't have to remember what those functions are. You can just do return false, and all those default behaviors are done. Okay, so if I do that, technically none of them should turn green now. Well, I guess one of them still does. Okay, I kind of see why. Okay. But that's pretty cool. But like, I also mentioned, like jQuery has like some cool like animation effects. So let's imagine that I want to make the thing that you just clicked on disappear. I could do like t.hide, and I can give it like in a number of seconds, and say like 10,000 seconds I want the thing to disappear. Okay. And see, it's slowly disappearing over 10 seconds. And there's a lot you can do there. So like, let's go to jQuery's documentation for a second. Again, there's a lot in jQuery, so API documentation. Let's look up that hide function. Okay, hide, here we go. Duration, complete. So again, you can choose the duration. Okay, effects, let's go to effects. Okay, because see, here are the different like effects you can do. Fade in, fade out, finish, hide. Okay, there's a whole bunch of them. Okay, and each of them have their own like little things you can do with them. Okay, toggle is also another really great function that it has, where you can toggle something's visibility. There's also toggle class. So in this case, what I could do is, instead of changing the CSS this way, I could do t.toggle class, and we'll say cheese. So now we'll go to the CSS. I will create a class called cheese, and say that when this class is applied, the font size is 4 EMs, and we'll say the color is just some random color. We'll say violet. Okay. So now anytime I click on the div, I'm going to toggle that class. So let's go over here. Well, let's refresh back. So is it put, oh no, because they already have a class of cheese by default, because I put that over here. So let's get rid of that. Okay, so that way they start with no cheese. Now if I click on one, see, I can now toggle the class pretty easily and just make changes, sort of visibility, by toggling that class. Okay, nice. Okay, and then, you know, you can make buttons look selected that way, all that cool stuff. So that's a really cool effect. So again, a lot of cool functions. Also, it even has its own function for making API requests. So if you don't like fetch, because you have to do those like double dot thens, if you don't want to reload another library and load Axios, well, there's the Ajax function. So imagine that I want to go get some data from somewhere. So I have some dummy data here. Okay, so let's pretend I wanted to get this Mario Brothers JSON data. Okay, and I wanted to put it on my website. Well, I can take the URL and I can use jQuery. I'll just sit there and say, okay, $.ajax is the function, and I just give it the URL and say, hey, go get me that Mario data. Okay, just like using fetch. Okay, because if you've done some API requests, you've probably used fetch before, you've probably used Axios, and then I can just do a .then like you would, but except you only need one .then. So that one .then, you just pass a function to it. Technically, this .then will run after the API call has completed. So once that request to another website has been completed and the data has come back, this .then will run. So this will have the data, so we can then use it. So I can then say, you know, what I'll do is I'll do the following. I'll sit there and say, well, first let's console.log the data to make sure we're getting it. Okay, make sure that we're getting what we think we're getting. That's always the first step when you're making an API call. Log the data, make sure you got the right data. So let me go over here and go to my console, and there it is. See, I'm getting this object, that in the object there's an array called NES games. Okay, so that's what I want to loop over. So what I want to do is say for game of data.nes games. And then let me just make sure that this loop is working. So I'll console.log game, make sure that it's an individual game. So let's see here, and yep, I'm logging each one of the games. And again, I'm pulling this data from another website. So I'm pulling some data from another website using the Ajax function, and now I'm gonna put it up on my page here. Okay, so I got that. So what we'll do is that for each one, what I'm going to do is I will create a div. So I'm going to say const div equals a new div. So I'll use jQuery to create a new div using the angle brackets. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some HTML in that div. So I'll use .html. I'll use backticks to use interpolation. And I'm going to say for each one, I'm going to say there's an h1. And inside that h1, I'm going to say we'll inject the variable of game dot name, I think. Okay, let me just see if that's working. No, I think I got the wrong variable name. Let me console.log game still, so I can see what data is inside each individual game. Okay, and there. So it's name and image. Okay, so yeah, so that's fine. And then we would create an image tag. So image source, and the source would equal the URL. So I would just inject the URL here, which would be game.image. If I remember right here, let me just read this again. Oh, img. So that's the img property. So that'd be game.img. Okay, and okay, game.img. Good. And then what I want to do is append this div to the body. So then I'll just grab the body using jQuery. And then I can use the append function to append to the body. And what I want to append is the div I just made. And now I got all my Super Mario Brothers games. Yay, and then I can like style it and make it pretty and whatnot. Okay, but the idea is that I have all this right out of the box with jQuery. Okay, which is again really useful. Even nowadays, okay? I mean, there really isn't a better library that does this. I mean, nowadays, there's also, I would say, like probably the closest competitor nowadays to being sort of a replacement for jQuery would be Alpine. Okay, alpine.js. Because again, nowadays the reason you would use jQuery is because again, you're not using React, you're not using Svelte, you're not using Angular, because you prefer server-side templating with something like, again, Blade templates on PHP, or Plush templates on Go, or Jinja templates on Python. Like, you're using that to do the bulk of your website, but you still need, you need buttons to be clickable, you need forms to do things. There's front-end code that has to be written. jQuery would be sort of like the easiest tool to reach for in that situation. Alpine.js is built to sort of be an alternative to that. So again, in that same situation, there's Alpine. I have other videos on this Alpine. It's just kind of a newer thing, and it's kind of growing. But that would be sort of like the most modern alternative. But jQuery, again, jQuery is the big thing, is the elephant in the room. Again, you said that earlier, 7.5 million websites. So why is it worth spending the time playing with jQuery? One, I think it's kind of fun. Okay, it's very fun to play with jQuery once in a while because it gives you a lot of freedom. It doesn't really put you in a box with a lot of rules, kind of like a lot of the like Angular, React, Svelte. Svelte is pretty flexible. But I mean, if you've ever done like React or Angular or Vue development, like there's a certain way you have to kind of do things, and you kind of have to operate within that workflow. Well, jQuery is like, do what you want because it's a library. It's not really trying to be a framework. It's not trying to give you rules. It's just saying, hey, here's just an easier way of doing things you've been doing. And will always be a need for that. So, jQuery is and will be a very popular web framework for as long as there will be, because a lot of sites will have used it, and there's still again a lot of good applications to use it today. Okay, again, I wouldn't be surprised if you see Alpine make a strong play for filling in that gap with server-side templating, but again, jQuery, it just makes writing front-end JavaScript when you just need small bits of it so pleasant. It's a great tool. The only downside is the size of the library, but even in that case, what you can do is if you don't need any like the special effects, you just really need like being able to select the DOM element, and you don't need the Ajax function, you're good using fetch. You can use like the slim version of jQuery, which is a lot smaller, and that just kind of gives you the basic sort of the ability to like select elements and manipulate elements and whatnot, but still with that sort of jQuery API in a much smaller package. So there's that. And again, jQuery's parsed out a lot of these extra pieces like jQuery UI, which is something you can use for like dragging effects, like if you want to do like drag and drop and other really kind of cool effects. That's just another library in the jQuery family that gives you a lot of these other cool tools. So just hopefully that gives you just a little bit more idea. Like there's all these kind of cool things you can do. And again, there's widgets that exist already for like using when you're using jQuery, things like accordions and control groups. And there's just so much code out there you can find that other people have created of cool things in jQuery that there's a lot to work with. So again, React gets a lot of hype, so does Angular, so does Svelte, and these are things I love. I love those frameworks. I've done lots of videos on them. But I do think a lot of developers take for granted how important it is to still know or be familiar with jQuery. So hopefully you found this video useful, so that way you're familiar with what jQuery is, why it works, why does it matter, and you have a great day. My name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and yeah, and then also, of course, go check out the blog for all sorts of other cool articles over there at toots.alexmercedcoder.com. Have a great day.